My name is Evelyn Brooks, and I'm 64 years old. A year ago I packed up my little life in Oregon, a one-bedroom apartment, a shelf of well-loved cookbooks, and a garden I'd tended for a decade, and moved to Denver, Colorado. My son Daniel had just bought a fixer-upper in a quiet suburb. His wife, Heather, was glowing with the stress and joy of raising their 5-year-old Tommy. They needed help, they said. Steady hand. You're the heart of our family, Heather told me over the phone. We'd love to have you closer. So I sold my place. Gave them $40,000 to help remodel the kitchen and finish the basement. Moved into the guest room. Brought my grandmother's quilt, my favorite mugs, and a suitcase full of trust. First it felt right. Family dinners. The smell of cinnamon rolls in the morning. Board games with Tommy, who still mispronounced kangaroo, and thought I could fix anything. Daniel would come home from work, tired but smiling. Heather would pour us glasses of red wine and say, "We're so lucky to have you here, Evelyn." They made me feel needed. But then Thanksgiving came. The house was full of noise and heat and the smell of roasted turkey. Heather wore an apron with little pumpkins on it and laughed too loudly at Daniel's jokes. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. We sat down to eat, Tommy grinning, Heather heaping stuffing onto my plate, when my phone buzzed. Message. Unknown number. Don't eat anything. Trust me. I stared at the screen, heart suddenly hammering in my chest. Heather smiled at me. More cranberry sauce, Evelyn. Her voice was bright. Her eyes weren't. I looked down at my plate. My stomach turned. I forced a smile and said, "Maybe just a little." I didn't eat a bite. I excused myself early that night and sat in the dark guest room, staring at the message. Who sent it? Why? And why, suddenly, did I feel like a guest in a house that was no longer mine to trust? After Thanksgiving, I started watching everything a little more closely. Heather didn't act any differently. Not overtly. She still smiled, still asked how I slept in the mornings, still complimented my baking. But something had shifted. Or maybe something that had always been there was finally coming into focus. She stopped saying thank you. It was a small thing, easy to miss. But when you make dinner 5 nights in a row, pack your grandson's lunches, fold laundry that isn't yours, you notice when the acknowledgement stops. One afternoon I picked Tommy up from school like I always did. We walked home, hand in hand, him talking about finger paint and frogs. When we walked in, Heather was at the kitchen island. "I thought I told you I'd get him today," she said. And blinked. "You didn't mention it." She smiled tightly. "You must have forgotten." A few days later I couldn't find my car keys. I searched every drawer, my purse, the kitchen counter. Finally, I asked Heather if she'd seen them. "Oh," she said casually. "Daniel and I decided it was best you didn't drive anymore. Your reaction time isn't what it used to be." She said it like it was a weather report. "Oh." Unbothered. "They're just keys," she added. "You've got everything you need here." I nodded slowly. But something inside me, something steady, tilted off center. A week after that, I noticed my pill organizer had been rearranged. I've always been meticulous about my medication. Blood pressure, cholesterol, a mild anti-inflammatory for joint pain. But the colors were off. One of the pills looked unfamiliar. I asked Heather about it. She waved her hand. "Daniel thought you were having trouble keeping track. He called the doctor and had them simplify your regimen." I never gave Daniel permission. I never authorized any changes. But there it was, a new set of pills. No explanation. I didn't feel confused. Felt erased. It continued in moments so small they might not register to anyone else. Heather started calling me sweetheart, in a tone I'd never heard before. The tone you use for someone not fully present. At dinner, she corrected me mid-sentence. I'd say we'd gone to the park on Thursday. She'd interrupt, smile and say, "No, Evelyn, that was Tuesday, remember?" Whether she was right or not didn't matter. She planted the doubt. When I'd forget where I put my reading glasses, she'd whisper to Daniel in the kitchen, just loud enough for me to hear, "I think it's starting." Sometimes she'd watch me from the corner of the room. Not with concern. with calculation. One night I heard her on the phone. I was walking past the laundry room when her voice carried through the door. If she forgets one more thing, the doctor will label her incompetent. Then we can move things forward. I stopped breathing. Then I backed away. What did move things forward mean? I began double-checking everything, writing it down. I started keeping a notebook, what I ate, what I said, what I did. Not out of paranoia, but for proof. I wanted to know, day by day, that I wasn't losing my mind. And then came Tommy's birthday. He was turning 6. I'd spent weeks helping him plan. I bought streamers, made cupcakes, ordered a new puzzle he'd been asking for. The morning of, Heather came into my room with a tight smile. "Don't worry about the party today. Just rest. We've got it all handled." I sat up in bed. I thought I was helping set up. She tilted her head. "You were so tired yesterday. And remember, you thought the party was on Saturday. It was Saturday." "I'm feeling fine," I said. She shook her head slowly. "It's okay. You don't have to pretend." Then she walked out and closed the door behind her. I sat there for an hour. Eventually I looked out the window. I saw children arriving. Balloons. Music. Laughter. No one came to get me. No one asked where I was. That night, Tommy came to kiss me goodnight. "You missed the party, Grandma," he said. "Mommy said you were sleeping, 'cause your brain gets tired." My hands stayed still on the blanket. I kissed his forehead and told him he did great. But inside I felt something fracture. That was the first time I wondered if Heather was preparing the world to believe I was already gone, even though I was still sitting right there. The next morning, I began hiding my untouched food in containers and placing them in the back of the freezer. The food she cooked always made me groggy. Always a little too sweet or salty or rich. I started refusing dinner, politely. "Just not hungry tonight." Lunch was heavy. Trying to watch my cholesterol. I stopped taking the pills I didn't recognize. Slowly the fog started to lift. My memory felt clearer. I started waking before my alarm. I remembered names, appointments, recipes. Heather noticed. She began hovering more. Asking questions in that falsely casual tone. "Do you remember where we went yesterday?" Smiled. "Yes. The grocery store. You bought apples." Her smile faltered for a split second. Then she asked, "And the man at the checkout, what color was his hair?" "Gray," I said. "It was." She started checking my room when I wasn't home. I moved my journal to a hidden pocket in my suitcase. One night, I heard her in the hallway. "She's not slipping fast enough." That was the night I knew. Heather wasn't just waiting for me to decline. She was trying to help me fall. Tommy's school play was scheduled for a Thursday evening in early March. He had been practicing for weeks. I helped him rehearse every line, even the ones that weren't his. He wanted to be perfect, and he was. His little voice would rise and fall with such pride, such sweetness. I sewed a patch on his costume and baked cookies for his class the day before. It meant everything to him. And it meant everything to me. That morning I laid out my nicest sweater, the green one he always said made me look like a leaf grandma, and checked my phone for the time again and again. At 4:15 I went to the kitchen, where Heather was stirring something on the stove. "What time are we leaving for the play?" I asked. She didn't turn around. "It's been cancelled." My chest tightened. "What?" "The school called this morning. Flu outbreak. They're postponing it." I stood there for a moment confused, then nodded. An hour later, I went into the backyard to water the rosemary I'd potted last fall. From the gate, I saw Heather's car pulling out of the driveway. Tommy was in the back seat, face pressed to the window. He was wearing his costume, and they were smiling. I stood frozen as the car disappeared down the street. When they returned 3 hours later, I was sitting in the living room. Heather walked in holding Tommy's coat. "We just went for a drive. He needed air." Tommy ran to me. "Grandma." I did it. I remembered every line. I looked at her. She didn't blink. "Why did you say it was cancelled?" I asked quietly. She smiled too easily. Oh, miscommunication. I thought it had been, but then they decided to hold it anyway. Last minute. I would have gone. It was freezing. And dark. You've been tired lately. She started toward the kitchen. I'm not tired, I said. He paused. I'm not sick, I added. He turned around. No one said you were. But her eyes did. I didn't argue. Didn't yell. I kissed Tommy goodnight, washed my face and went to bed. But I didn't sleep. Because that night I knew something had changed. She wasn't just isolating me. She wasn't just planting doubts. She was erasing me, quietly, carefully, from the spaces where I belonged. And Daniel, he never mentioned the play. Not once. 2 days later, I received another text from the same unknown number. Check your bedroom drawer. That was it. No signature. No name. I stood at the foot of my bed for a long time before I opened the bottom drawer. Tucked beneath a stack of winter scarves was a small plastic pill bottle with a crooked label. My name misspelled. A dosage I didn't recognize. I took it to the pharmacy the next day and asked about it. The pharmacist raised an eyebrow. This is not what it says it is. He held the bottle like it was a bug under glass. This is an antipsychotic. Wrong one. You sure this was prescribed to you? I shook my head. He looked concerned. You need to talk to your doctor. I nodded and thanked him, heart racing as I walked back to the car. I scheduled an appointment that same day with a new doctor. Not the family one Heather always insisted I see. A young woman named Dr. Laura Chen across town, who didn't know me yet and hadn't been fed any stories. I told her everything. Not the dramatic parts. Not the text. Just the symptoms. Pills. The confusion. The way my thoughts used to feel like fogged glass and now felt more like themselves again. She listened. Ordered blood tests. And then she said the most important words anyone had said to me in months. I believe you. I cried in her office. Quietly. Quickly. Then I left, holding that fragile belief like a flame cupped in my hands. A week later, Dr. Chen called. Evelyn, the results are back. You had multiple sedatives and antipsychotics in your system. None of them match your current medical file. Some shouldn't have been prescribed at all. Not for someone your age, not at those doses. Thanked her. Then I hung up. And I opened my file drawer. Behind the electric bills and insurance notices was a packet labeled estate planning. Brooks family. Inside, I found something I'd never signed. A power of attorney document. Filed and dated 6 months earlier. It gave Heather full authority over my medical decisions, bank accounts, and property in the event of mental incompetence. The signature at the bottom was mine. Only, it wasn't. I studied it. The loops were too wide. The tail of the Y didn't drop the way mine did. She'd forged it. I stared at that document for a long time. Then I looked around the room, the familiar chair, the quilt on the bed, the lamp my mother had given me, and realized none of it was mine anymore. Not in her eyes. Heather had built a version of me that was fading, confused, dangerous. And if I hadn't noticed, if I hadn't started writing things down, hiding my food, locking my journals, I might have disappeared into the version she created. Just a name with trembling hands and no credibility. But now I had the truth. And soon I'd have the proof. After I found the forged power of attorney, I didn't confront Heather. Not yet. She was still watching me, subtly always, from the corner of her eye, from the end of a sentence. Testing the air. Waiting to see how much of her illusion I still believed in. So I played along. I took my medications each morning, then slipped them into a tissue and flushed them down the toilet when no one was looking. I smiled when she asked if I needed help with simple tasks. I nodded when she reminded me of things I hadn't forgotten. But behind that smile I was moving. Silently. Carefully. Each day I took a small step. I created a new email address. I opened a new checking account at a different bank across town and had my pension redirected. I made photocopies of the power of attorney and stored them in a safety deposit box, along with notes documenting every interaction, every conversation, every small shift in behavior. I started recording audio on my phone, Not everything, just the tone of her voice when she thought no one was listening. But the most important step came 2 weeks later, when Dr. Chen called again. I had the lab run tests on the blood sample and compared it with a list of prescriptions in your file. Pause. There are substances in your system that don't appear on any record. Someone was administering unprescribed medications. Repeatedly. I asked her if she could help me document that in writing. She didn't hesitate. She drafted a formal letter. Clinical evidence of foreign substances in my system, consistent with manipulation or covert administration. She offered to help coordinate with law enforcement. But I asked for time, because I still didn't know who was helping me. The messages had stopped, those strange sudden texts from an unknown number. No signature. No trace. Who had warned me? Why? And would they reach out again? They did. 3 days later. This time it wasn't a message. It was a printout, folded into my coat pocket while I was out in the garden. It read, "There are files in Heather's email. Search assessment Evelyn." I stared at the paper. My hands were shaking. If this was real, if Heather had left a digital trail, I could find it. But I needed access. That night, while she and Daniel were at a neighborhood meeting, I opened her laptop. I didn't know the password, but I knew Heather. It was the date of Tommy's birthday. In reverse. I guessed right on the second try. I opened the email search bar and typed, "Assessment, Evelyn." There were 9 threads. The first one chilled me. Attached is the mock report for Evelyn Brooks. It indicates early-stage dementia and mild paranoia. Let me know if you need edits before the submission to the family physician. I clicked the attachment. It was a fake medical report. Detailed, formatted to look official, with a fabricated signature from a doctor I'd never met. The next email was from Heather to a lawyer. As discussed, once we get the formal dementia label, we can finalize the living trust transfer. Daniel is still hesitant, but I'm working on him. Another thread. Once she's legally incompetent, I'll assume full guardianship. We can start listing the house as early as March. That was next month. I took screenshots of everything. Then I shut the laptop, erased my tracks, and returned to my room. My hands wouldn't stop shaking for hours. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the guest room with the door locked, listening to every creak in the floorboards, every whisper of air through the vents. She'd planned this for months, maybe longer. She wasn't just manipulating me. She was building a legal case to erase me, inch by inch, until nothing left of my autonomy remained. And Daniel, he was part of it. Or at least complicit enough to sign where she pointed. I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the fact that it had been done with such ease. With smiles. With warm dinners. With invitations to stay a little longer, rest a little more, let someone else handle the hard things. They'd wrapped poison in comfort. And I'd swallowed it whole until now. The next morning I met with Dr. Chen again. I gave her the screenshots. She read every line carefully, her lips tight. Then she handed them back. "I'm ready when you are." I asked her how to move forward. She introduced me to Detective Maria Sanchez, a quiet, sharp-eyed woman with a notepad that never seemed to leave her hand. We met in a corner booth of a small coffee shop. I told her everything. The medications, the manipulation, the fake reports, the emails. She listened without interrupting once. Then she nodded and said, "We'll start with the forged power of attorney." That was the entry point. From there, they'd investigate the medical fraud, financial manipulation, and if the food samples showed evidence of tampering, potential poisoning. She asked if I'd be willing to wear a wire. Said yes. Because if they needed proof, I would give them proof. Heather had built her case in secret. Now I would build mine, in the open, backed by people who believed me, anchored in a truth she couldn't erase. I was no longer surviving in the shadows. I was stepping into the light. From the outside I was still Evelyn, polite, careful, a little forgetful. From the inside I was something else entirely. I wore the wire. It was smaller than I expected. A soft black clip hidden in the folds of my cardigan. Detective Sanchez gave it to me in a plain brown envelope and taught me how to turn it on with a single tap. We rehearsed what I might say. How to lead Heather into talking. Not confrontational, just curious. Disoriented. Vulnerable. Play the role she wants you to play, Maria said. And so I did. That evening after dinner, I waited until Daniel went to put Tommy to bed. Heather was rinsing dishes. I leaned against the counter, clutching a mug of tea I had no intention of drinking. Heather said softly. She didn't look up. I've been feeling foggy again lately. Like I did last fall. She turned off the tap. Do you think it's getting worse? Yes. She dried her hands slowly. Honestly. Yes. Do you think it's time I saw a doctor again? She studied me. Then she smiled, that patient, honey-sweet smile she always used when she thought I was pliable. I think that would be a good idea, Evelyn. Just to document how things are progressing. For your safety. For Tommy's too, right? Exactly, she said. She poured the dishwater slowly, like nothing about this conversation was unusual. Then she added, almost carelessly, and if it's confirmed, well, then we'll finally be able to get some things in place. Make sure everything's protected. He nodded. Thank you, I said. That night, I handed the recorder to Detective Sanchez. It was enough. Enough to show intent. Enough to prove planning. Enough to expose Heather's calm, coordinated strategy to strip me of autonomy under the guise of concern. Meanwhile, the food samples were at the lab. I had kept nearly every dinner plate since late January, tucked in labeled containers, frozen behind an old bag of peas in the back of the freezer. Dr. Chen had arranged the testing discreetly. Took a week. The results came on a Thursday morning. I opened the email slowly, breath tight in my chest. Inside the report, traces of zolpidem and quetiapine, both sedative and antipsychotic, neither of which I'd ever been prescribed. It was the final proof. I printed the report, slid it into my growing binder of documentation, and exhaled for the first time in what felt like months. By now, I was fully off the unknown medications. My head was clearer than it had been in nearly a year. I started waking early, cooking for myself, stretching in the mornings, reading without losing track of the plot. Heather noticed. She started watching me differently, no longer with condescension but with caution. She asked more questions than usual. How are you sleeping? You seem a little keyed up lately. I saw you moving money around online. Are you having trouble with the bank? I smiled gently each time. No trouble at all. Then came the paranoia. Not from me but from her. She checked the mail before I could. She changed the Wi-Fi password. She began locking her office. She once asked me, out of nowhere, "You haven't been talking to anyone about the power of attorney, have you?" I blinked. I don't even remember signing that, honestly. She relaxed. Too easily. She wanted me confused. She needed me soft. I gave her nothing. Then, one morning, Daniel sat down beside me at the kitchen table. His face looked tired. Paler than usual. His mouth moved like he'd rehearsed this. "Mom," he said, "Heather's worried about you." "Oh." "She thinks you might need more care than we can give." I stirred my tea. "More care?" "She found a facility," he said. "Just for a short stay. Few days. To assess things." He looked at me the way a boy looks at his mother when he's trying to lie well. "I'll be back before dinner," he added. I said nothing. Just smiled. A smile I'd worn for years. I met with Detective Sanchez the next day and told her what he'd said. She wasn't surprised. "They're escalating because they're losing control," she said. "This is where it usually peaks." I asked if we could move forward. He said yes. The warrants were ready. Her team had already compiled the evidence. The emails, the audio, the medical reports, the fake power of attorney. They'd tracked Heather's pharmacy orders. She'd used an online service to avoid local records. One of the preparation matched what had been found in the blood work. Maria said the charges would include attempted poisoning, elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and identity manipulation. He paused. And likely attempted murder. He nodded. It didn't feel real. Not yet. The arrest came on a Tuesday morning. I watched from the front window. 2 unmarked cars pulled into the driveway. Heather answered the door. I couldn't hear what was said, only saw the moment her smile collapsed. The handcuffs glinted like frost. Daniel stood behind her, mouth open, unmoving. Tommy was at school. I was glad for that. I didn't want him to see her taken like that. Didn't want him to see the lies unravel in real time. Didn't want the chaos of truth to become his memory of home. The detective stayed with Daniel. Talked with him calmly. Offered him a lawyer. He declined. When they left, he didn't look at me. Just went upstairs and closed the door. I made myself toast. Sat down in the quiet kitchen. And felt the house shift. Not violently. Just slightly. Like a weight had moved off the center of its spine. That evening, Tommy came home with a substitute teacher. "Where's Mom?" he asked. Daniel looked to me. I bent down and took Tommy's hand. "She's gone somewhere for a while," I said. "And it's going to be just us for now." He nodded. Then asked if we could play the dinosaur game. We did. That night, after he went to sleep, Daniel came into the kitchen. His eyes were red. "She told me you were sick," he said. "That you needed help. That I was protecting you." I didn't answer. "She said she loved you. That this was all for your own good." Still I said nothing. Because explanations couldn't change what had been done. Eventually he asked, "Can I ever fix this?" I looked at him, really looked at him and said, "Not yet." Then I stood, turned off the light and went to bed. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was mine. After the arrest, everything changed, and yet not all at once. The house was still the same. The kitchen counters Heather insisted on resurfacing were still speckled beige. The spice rack she organized in alphabetical order still hung on the wall. But the temperature was different. It wasn't the furnace. It was the silence. Daniel didn't speak to me for 2 days. He didn't leave either. He made Tommy's breakfast, packed his lunch, sat through his homework like a man walking underwater. He barely looked at me. On the 3rd day, I found him in the garage, sitting on the old folding chair next to the broken treadmill. He didn't look up when I walked in. "I thought she loved me," he said. I didn't speak. "She told me we were protecting you. That your memory was going. That the power of attorney was just for security." He rubbed his hands together like he was cold. I believed her. God help me, I believed her. I stood by the door, not ready to sit. Not ready to comfort. Then he said something I hadn't expected. She made it seem like she was doing the hard thing. Like, she was the one making sacrifices. He looked at me then, really looked. And I let her do it. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just sat in the wreckage of his choices and stared into them. That was enough for now. The calls started 2 days after the arrest. Block numbers. Unfamiliar area codes. Some were voicemails. Calm voices urging me to reconsider, to drop the charges for the sake of Tommy. Others were less polite. "You'll ruin your son's life. She was trying to help you. Don't drag your family through the mud just to make a point." I didn't answer. But I kept every message, forwarded each one to Detective Sanchez, and added them to the folder labeled Aftermath. Then came the text. Some from family members I hadn't heard from in years. Heather's cousin, a woman named Lisa I'd met once at a barbecue, now suddenly invested in my sanity. "I know you're hurting, but this isn't the way. Heather always said you were like a mother to her. Don't let bitterness poison what's left." I didn't reply. Because the truth wasn't bitter. It was clean. It was the first clean thing I'd had in a long time. Daniel's shift came quietly. No grand gesture. No apologies on bent knee. One night, after Tommy was asleep, he came into the kitchen while I was washing dishes. He picked up a towel and dried silently beside me. After a minute he said, "I'm seeing someone. A therapist." He nodded. He kept drying. "Her name's Beth. She's helping me figure out how I missed so much. I looked over. That's a good start. Then softly. You were tired. Grateful. New father stretched thin. You wanted to believe you had a partner who could carry the weight. He blinked. Then, she carried it. Just not in the direction I thought. We finished the dishes in silence. One afternoon I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside. A single sheet of lined paper, folded twice. The handwriting was familiar. All loops and leaning letters. Heather. Evelyn. I know you think I meant to hurt you, but I was trying to build something safe for all of us. You were slipping. Daniel wouldn't see it. I had to act. I never wanted it to get this far. But you made it this way. You chose to fight instead of accept help. If you drop the charges, maybe we can rebuild. If not, well, least I tried. I folded the letter back up and placed it in the aftermath folder. There was no apology in it. Only control disguised as concern. She hadn't written to me. She'd written at me. Later that week, I received a visit from the Child Protective Services liaison assigned to Tommy's case. She sat across from me at the dining room table. Her clipboard between us like a barrier. We're reviewing temporary custody options, she said. Given the arrest and Daniel's complicity. My chest tightened. Has Daniel been charged? Yes. No, she said. But he's under review. The concern is, how much did he know and how safe is Tommy under his care? I wanted to say he was a good father. But good fathers don't ignore red flags. They don't let their mothers be drugged under their own roof. So I said nothing. She nodded. We've noted your role in uncovering the abuse. And you've been Tommy's consistent caregiver. She looked at me with something close to warmth. Your home is stable. That night, Daniel and I sat on the porch while Tommy slept. I told him about the visit. He nodded slowly. I'll do whatever they say, he said. Whatever's best for him. I believed him. Because finally, he'd stopped trying to defend her. School, Tommy started drawing again. Lots of trees. Big ones with roots and little figures underneath. He brought one home and gave it to me. That's you, he said, pointing to a red dress under the tree. And that's me, he added, a stick figure with big ears. Smiled. Why the big ears? So I can hear better when people lie. My throat tightened. I knelt down, pulled him into my arms, and said the only thing I could think to say. You're safe now. He nodded into my shoulder. And I knew. This wasn't just about surviving Heather. It was about unlearning the damage. Rebuilding truth where lies had been planted. Reclaiming love without manipulation. And most of all, giving this boy, this smart, sensitive, too observant boy, a home that didn't whisper poison in the walls. One morning I walked past the mirror in the hallway. Stopped. Looked at myself. Really looked. And realized something simple. I was back. The version of me that cooked for joy, not obligation. Who read entire novels in one sitting. Who didn't flinch at her own reflection or second-guess her memory. They tried to turn me into someone forgettable. But I had remembered everything. And I had written it down. And I had survived. 6 months later I moved. Not far, just over state lines, but far enough that the air felt different, lighter. I chose Wilmington, North Carolina. Ocean nearby, good weather, quiet streets. The kind of place where no one knows your name unless you want them to. The kind of place where you can start over. The sale of the house went through after a long, tense process. Daniel signed everything. He didn't ask to keep it, not once. Said the house held too many ghosts. I let him have a portion of the equity. Enough to restart, but not so much that it erased consequence. The rest I used to buy a 2-bedroom townhouse with wide windows and a small balcony just big enough for herbs and a chair. It was the first thing I'd owned outright in years. Not co-signed. Not shared. Not in the family name. Tommy visits in the summers. He's different now, less watchful, more boy. He loves the ocean. Collects shells. Asks questions about clouds. He still draws trees sometimes. But now the people under them are always smiling. Daniel brings him and stays for a day or two. He's quieter these days. Still in therapy. Still learning to speak without spinning. He never mentions Heather. She was sentenced to 9 years. Attempted murder. Elder abuse. Fraud. They dropped the forgery charge in exchange for full restitution. Everything she'd siphoned from my accounts, back to the penny. I didn't want the money, but I took it anyway. Because dignity deserves receipts. And the truth deserves a paper trail. I joined a book club. 5 women, all over 60. Each of us with stories we don't always share, but understand anyway. One of them, Joyce, told me she'd lost her sister to a husband who slowly isolated her. Another, Marlene, once found forged checks in her name after trusting her niece with her finances. There's something about betrayal that makes you recognize it in others. And something about survival that makes you want to build peace out of what's left. We meet every Thursday. We eat lemon bars and argue about fiction like it matters. Sometimes it does. The messages never came again. No more unknown numbers. No more whispers tucked into coat pockets. To this day, I don't know who sent them. A nurse. A neighbor. A former friend of Heather's who saw too much. Sometimes I think about tracing the number. Hiring someone. Looking. But I never do. Because they gave me the first crack of light when the world was going dark. And that's enough. Not all angels want to be seen. One morning I was on the balcony, drinking coffee and trimming the mint when Tommy came outside. He was 8 by then. Taller. And I still too sharp for his age. "Grandma," he said, "do you miss your old house?" Thought about it. About the rosemary bush in the backyard. The dent in the hallway where Tommy had run too fast with a toy truck. The kitchen where Heather had smiled with poison on her breath. "I miss who I was before I went there," I said. He looked at me. "But you're back now, right?" Smiled. "Yes," I said. "I'm back now." The last letter I received from Heather came 2 months into her sentence. I didn't open it. I burned it on the balcony in a shallow dish and watched the ash scatter over my basil. Because I didn't need to know what she thought. I already knew who she was. And I had no room in my life for her story anymore. Daniel still sends updates. They're short. Simple. Tommy lost his first tooth. Tommy learned to ride a bike. Tommy asked if Grandma could come to his recital. I go when I can. Sit quietly in the back. Smile when he waves. Daniel and I don't talk about what happened. That's the deal. We're rebuilding something, not what we had, but something honest. Something sturdy. No more pretending. No more looking the other way. And no more, just for now, arrangements that slowly become cages. My house is small. But every item in it is mine. Every chair. Every plate. Every spoon. My mail goes unopened until I choose to read it. My phone doesn't ring unless I want it to. And my name is signed only by me. Some days, I still wake early and expect the fog to return. Expect the confusion, the slowness, the whispers behind my back. But it doesn't come. Because that fog was never mine to begin with. It was put on me, layered like coats I never asked to wear. And now I've peeled each one off. And folded them away. And walked out of the house, finally, into my own name. If you ask me what freedom feels like at 65, I'll tell you. It's knowing the difference between love and control. It's choosing peace, even when you had to carve it with your own hands. It's no longer begging to be believed, because you've learned to believe yourself. It's coffee on a balcony with mint, silence, and no one watching you shrink. It's not being someone's project, or someone's guilt, or someone's excuse. It's being someone. It's being yourself, and nothing less.